This video is brought to you by my supporters over at Hey Craftapreneur. Hey Craftapreneur is my monthly pattern club, which includes my knitting, crochet, and centro knitting machine designs. Each month, members are given access to at least 2 of these designs, as they are either added to the library or updated, and they will have continual access to my entire written/video pattern library for as long as they are members. Membership also gives you the title of Super Crafty, because that's what you are. Members are also given complimentary access to most of my crochet or knitting courses that are published on the website. For example, I recently published a step-by-step crochet course which will walk you through all the terminology, discussions about gauge, and the actual mechanics of the craft. It is a self-paced course that is usually purchased individually, but because you are monthly or quarterly supporters, you get access to it totally free as long as you're signed up for the club. The support I get from Hey Craftapreneur allows me to continue to operate this channel and publish the tutorial content that you've come to know and love. So, if you want to support me and make cool stuff, as I'm sure you've seen under the community tab here, then consider heading over and signing up today after the end of this tutorial. Alright, let's dive into the instruction. Hello everybody, welcome to another video. My name is Infiniti, and today I am back with another Continental knitting stitch tutorial. Today I will be showing you how to knit the Jacob's ladder stitch, which is actually a lot simpler than I initially thought it was. And it gives you this nice pop of texture on your fabric, much like a cable would on a bed of garter stitch. So without further ado, I would love to dive into this tutorial. For today's video, I will have stitch markers on hand, as well as a crochet hook. This is a 6.5 millimeter, but you can use any hook you'd like, as long as it kind of coordinates with your yarn, because we'll be grabbing multiple strands of it. Alright, let's dive into the instruction. I also want to point out that this is a re-recording of this tutorial. Now, I had the bright idea to try this stitch on a thinner yarn at the last moment and ended up ruining my swatch, so I just wanted to show it off. I also plucked off 6 stitches at one time, which I will not be doing this time. I thought that was a good idea, but it was not. And I think a lot of that is just because of the difference in yarn weight and stretch and things like that. So this is what that mistake looks like. Very loose, not very, coherent or whatnot. So I had to cast it to the side in favor of a smaller one. So let's make a good swatch this time. Here I have my little swatch here, and I cast on 15, so I can have 6 stitches on either side and have 3 in the middle. So 15. Alright, and I'm only going to do 1 repeat of the ladder for this swatch. If you're going to do Jacob's ladder, there are a couple things you want to keep in mind. For one, you want to make sure that you're working on the right side of your work, if there is one. So if you're working any kind of other complicated stitch pattern, you want to make sure that you're front facing instead of on the back for this. And I feel like point number 2 will come back to me at some point. Anyway, so what we're going to do, we never want to work this stitch on the edge of our fabric, obviously, because we'll be unraveling things, and so you don't want that kind of business going on the edges of your work. But that was my second point. You'll want to do a little bit of math for this, so I like to do this stitch with skipping 3 stitches, which I'll explain in a bit. So you'll have to figure out how many stitches you'll want between each of your ladders. So in this case, I have 6 stitches on either side where I will not be manipulating the fabric. And so if I wanted to continue on, I could just do sections of 6 or whatnot. But that's totally up to you and whatever pattern you decide to follow. Okay, so what I'm going to do is knit off my first 6 stitches, just like I normally would. And 6. Yep. Alright. Now, the next 3 stitches, which I have determined to be my ladder stitches, I'm just going to pull them off my needle. There's no need to hold them or anything, because we're going to unravel those. Okay, and I then want to bear in mind my tension, right? Because I'm going to have this whole section here where I'm going to have loose stitches. So I kind of want to leave my tension loose so that I have some give between there. You can kind of adjust that after you make that knit stitch. So I have this little loose loop back here from where I just made my knit stitch. And now I can continue to knit the remainder of my stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Alright, and now we can put our other needle aside for a moment and just really take the time to move this swatch onto the needle. Now you can see that I managed my tension on this last row really well because it looks natural. Sometimes you can do your tension like you normally would and it'll be too tight because this will be scrunched up like this, and then you have to work to get that not so tight once you get to the top. But anywho, at this point we just want to take our time and start to unravel each row. There's no particular way to do it, but I do recommend that you make sure your work is at the center of your needle so it doesn't come flying off on you. I'm going to lay this down flat and just take my time. There's no rush here. Working through it. And this, the next step is why I keep stitch markers on hand. Another reason you want to make sure you're taking your time is that sometimes, depending on the fiber you use, things start to catch on each other because that's what fiber likes to do. It likes to make friends. So you want to make sure that you actually have all 3 of your stitches pulled out to the very end so it doesn't make your loops look really wonky. See how I just popped that string there because it wasn't all the way out. Just making my way down. All the way down to the cast on row, and we're even going to pull that out. Okay, and I give my swatch a little stretch again to make sure that all of those stitches are popped out that I want to be popped out, right? And at this point what we want to do is just count these ladders that are going up our work. They're actually called ladders if you knit regularly. So this is where my stitch markers come in because I like to section these off pretty early on. So let's see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Cool. So I have 20. So here I'm going to be grabbing 4 strands when I move up my work. And this is another reason why you're going to want to keep on top of your math, because it's really helpful when you can divide into these ladders evenly. But sometimes you can't, and that's fine too once you get to the top. But since I have 20 strands, I'm just going to section these off in groups of 4, and I'm going to place stitch markers there. In my initial swatch, that's what I did, because it helped me visually be able to pick up my strings, and then it really gives you the chance to sort through these and see where each strand is coming from, because sometimes you end up mixing these up and grab one from higher up than what you need to. Alright, now that I have all of my stitches sectioned off like I want them to, now we can begin to actually create the ladder. And you can kind of slide these stitch markers to one side or the other while you're creating. They're just a good visual for me. Now the one thing that I did do kind of differently from the original stitching was down here when I went to take up my cast on row, I put a twist in it because I thought that it made that first part look tighter, which was more akin to my normal tension. But if you don't like how that looks, then you can just do what I'm about to say. Okay, so on this first line, you're going to want to, by line I do mean where each tab is. So this first set of 4 ladders, you are going to want to pick that up, and you do want to put an initial twist into that. And it's really helpful to make sure that all of your twists are going the same way. But once you make your twist, you can insert your hook. Okay? And from here it's smooth sailing because you can just pick up each section, put that hook under there, and pull it through that previous twist that we made. Now my tension for whatever reason on this swatch was tighter, so I didn't have a need to really put that extra twist in there, but it's just something to think about if you are using a different yarn or you have a looser tension. But we're just going to go about pulling these loops through one another until we get to the top of our work. And for me that's really quick, but if you're working on a scarf or a blanket, it might take you a bit, but it's well worth taking your time on this. Okay, and I got my last section here. Alright, and that last one's always going to be a little tight because if you grab that loose loose line that you left in place of those 3 stitches, then that's always going to be tighter. But we're going to use these 4 loops in the end, so it's fine. But you can see down here where, because I didn't put that extra twist in, it's a little loose down here at the bottom. So if you don't like how that looks, you can either go through and pull and adjust these strings to kind of make them look even, or you can put that extra twist in at the bottom to make it tighter, which I can also show you how to do. Okay, so again here, this first line where I have my first stitch marker, I'm going to want to take those in hand, and we're going to twist, right? Before I only did this one time. In this case I would do it again, and it doesn't look like it will make a lot of difference from jump, but give it time, trust the process here, as they would say. Alright, and now I'm going to move on to grab my next section. Just going to yarn over and pull that loop through. You can already see how that's much tighter there. Okay, and so you want to also make sure that you're grabbing all of your strands as you pull through this. Okay? Alright, and so now that we have achieved our braid or our Jacob's ladder going up the front of our work, we can move on to the next part. And so here you can do a couple of things. You can either grab a knitting, like a cable needle, and just slip it in there, which I think I'll actually do this time, and let it hang, or you could use a stitch marker and let it hang also. Just anything to make sure you don't lose your loop and unravel your ladders. Okay, and I do have all 4 strands on there, so I'm just gonna let it hang. Now here on this back side is where I do what I call my little corrective row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply knit all the way up into the center of this, where I have my cable needle hanging on for dear life. Okay. And now that I'm at this opening, just gonna pick up my cable needle. Now here I have 4 of these strands on this cable needle, and you have a couple of options. You can either knit these, all 4 of them individually, or you can knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1 to maintain your original stitch count, you know, or any kind of alteration for your personal pattern, because you may have more strands per section, you may have less. And 3. Okay. Now I can set my cable needle to the side, and I can knit the rest of my normal stitches as I normally would. And 6. Alright, simple as that. And this is what the back side of this looks like. Okay, and when I turn it, this is my front side. And now I have this ladder perfectly on center on my bed of garter. And at this point, to finish your project, you can simply cast off as you normally would. So whichever cast off that you would prefer. I think my original swatch for this tutorial, I did I'm doing a stretchy bind off now. I think I did just a normal cast off, which I rarely do. Okay, and I'm just going to work this cast off, and I'll show you what this swatch looks like. That was very perfectly timed. Anyway, so this is what the Jacob's ladder looks like when you have completed your cast off. And I have a very similar result here. Now I feel like I had less stitches left over at the end of this one, and I ended up just knitting 2 together and tying it into this edge row. But for this one, like I said, I had 4 stitches, so I just did with it what I will. I don't really know how often I would use this stitch, but it does have a fair amount of stretch if you're using just your standard acrylic yarn, both vertically and horizontally. I do recommend doing a little vertical pulling on it though to get that in shape. You might also want to block your project when you're finished with it. Let me know down in the comments, what would you actually use this stitch for? I would be very interested. I've seen many people use these in shawls and wraps. I'm sure it would make a great throw blanket or scarf. I hope this video was enjoyable for you. If so, don't forget to leave it a thumbs up. Please subscribe and ring that notification bell so I can be a part of your future Continental knitting journey. I typically post these types of videos on Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. CST. And again, if you want to support this channel and keep these tutorials going beyond May of this year, then I ask that you head over and check out my members club, Hey Crafterpreneur. It's basically like a Patreon, but built directly into my website. There you get access to my entire knitting, crochet, and centro knitting machine pattern library. I update it about twice per month, so there's always something new to work on over there. And if you have your eye on any of my designs in particular, that's just a good way to access them. Otherwise, you can check out my handmade shop, where you can check out my pottery, my merch items. I design merch items, and my handmade pottery. I think I said that already. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy making!